Now, if you study that footage carefully, you notice there are no other passengers. Watts doesn't seem to be carrying any luggage. And he also says near the end of it, "Now I can hug you." As far as I know, that was because during the first take, it didn't really work. I think one of the children was crying when they saw their father, not out of love, but out of fear. It was like, who is this guy? They hadn't seen him in 5 weeks. And so I guess before Watts could even hug his children, Shan'ann sent him back to do the whole spiel all over again. In hindsight, what is very interesting about this whole period is Shan'ann now has Chris Watts in her orbit. She has him under her control effectively. She doesn't know it, but she has the opportunity now to win him back. She has 7 days to win him back effectively. And so do you think she does? And if she doesn't, why doesn't she?
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. Now, what is really interesting about this period, which kicks off from July 31st, a Tuesday morning, to about a week later, is this period we get to see the dynamic between Chris Watts and his wife, and to some extent with his children as well. We've seen the dynamic with Nicole Kessinger. All of it seems to be fun, love, happiness, joy, some ecstasy as well, because there's also sex. And so we want to contrast that with what Watts experiences with his better half. At the same time, we want to monitor this idea of brewing criminal psychology. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Obviously, if you're interested in this Chris Watts coverage, it's an ongoing series that will probably terminate in the middle of August. So if you're keen on staying up to date on this series, you might want to hit the notification bell. If you're finding this series meaningful and interesting, please hit the thanks button and let's get started. So Chris Watts had to be up early on July 31st, a Tuesday morning, to catch his 5 a.m. flight from Southwest Airlines. That was flight number WN656 from Denver International Airport to Raleigh, North Carolina. I've actually flown from the Denver airport as well. It's a pretty huge airport. It wouldn't be a direct flight either. He flew via Atlanta, including the stopover. He'd be at airports in transit and in the air for around 5 hours. Plenty of time to get some shut-eye or to contemplate his lot in life. Since Watts had the use of the Lexus, something he elected to do either out of ignorance or more likely in spite of Shan'ann's wishes, he spent the night at Kessinger's, and then at close to 3 o'clock that morning drove direct from her place to the airport. Kessinger's apartment was on the way to the airport anyway, 5 minutes closer than driving from Frederick. Once again, the dodgy garage sensor not going off that morning came in real handy. It provided him with yet another alibi. Did you know that Kessinger's home was 15.7 miles south of the Watts residence? You can see exactly where it is in these screen grabs. Now, the fact that Watts took a photo of the parking sign suggests that Shan'ann did want Watts to take the car to the airport. They could all use it when they flew back. The setup at Denver parking is such that rates vary from $120 a day to $33 a day, $25 a day, $16 a day, and $8 a day. Now, I've actually gone there myself into this extended parking area, and that's quite an extensive area. It's a really, really big airport. Watts chose the second cheapest option, which triggered a fuming response from Shan'ann. We'll deal with that in more detail in a moment. We can clearly see Watts' headspace even early on a Tuesday morning. While he's trying to follow his wife's orders, he's also trying to hide away evidence of his mistress. At 0408, he hurriedly transfers around 50 images to the secret calculator. Once done with that, it's back to keeping the peace with Shan'ann. At 0446, he lets her know he's boarding and tells her he loves her. This is Watts trying to manipulate her with terms of endearment, but it doesn't work. The instructions Shan'ann sends to him at 04:53 for how to schedule a ride with Uber now actually suggest Shan'ann didn't authorize her husband to use the car and didn't want him to use airport parking whatsoever. We know even on her short trip to Arizona, Shan'ann caught a ride with Nicole and possibly shared the parking fee. Regardless whether Watts was in the wrong or whether Shan'ann was justified in being stung by yet another unnecessary expense, Watts's rendezvous with his wife was off to a pretty sobering start, arguing about parking prices. I mean, one of the first things she says to him at about 10 to 5 that morning is, "You never, ever listen to me. How much a day?" And so she's now trying to manage where he should park the car. Now, think about just in general what's going on here, where he'd been footloose and fancy-free, surfing the sand dunes and romping with his girlfriend over the weekend. Now, just like that, he's reduced to photographing parking signs and being reprimanded for not listening. Now he's going to be told absolutely what to do, and he must follow those instructions to the letter. Now, if Watts took and sent the parking photo on his own initiative, then we see signs of a more Machiavellian nature. Then the cheap parking image is a distraction from the real reason he wanted the car, which is so that he could transit at Kessinger's place for a final few hours before catching his flight. And we shouldn't miss sight of that, the fact that he is deliberately doing kind of what he wants to do. Watts continued to give Shan'ann regular updates. This too was in stark contrast to his behavior over the weekend and in fact over the past several weeks. Shan'ann also now continues to give orders. So when you think about the natural dynamic, this seems to be the natural dynamic, doesn't it? Is it the natural dynamic in his relationship with Kessinger? When he arrives, she's to let him know so that she can record the girl's reactions. Now, remember, it doesn't matter that he hates being in these videos and that all of them end up being posted on social media. The other thing is, what Watts is supposed to do here is sort of perform for the camera, and there's sort of no question of whether he's supposed to greet Shan'ann or even give her a hug. And she would later complain that at the airport it was difficult for her to get a kiss. But on the other hand, he was also acting in her sort of recording. And of course, if push comes to shove, did he really want to give her a kiss given who he'd been kissing and given what's really on his heart at that point? So that's kind of an authentic moment from him. If you think about it, if he arrives at the airport and kisses her, that would sort of show he's a real two-face. The fact that he doesn't really want to is kind of a sign of, in a way, someone being honest and true to their feelings in a way. But Watts tries to be as casual and forthcoming as he can. He tells her, "Okay, boo." He's using these terms of endearment. He doesn't want to alarm her. He's using the affectionate term often now to imply that there's absolutely nothing amiss from his side of the relationship. He doesn't want to be interrogated. He doesn't want to be confronted. And that's even though there are actually serious problems. Watts just doesn't want a confrontation. And so I think one way to think about this is one way for everything to perhaps have resolved itself peacefully is if Shan'ann had, let's say, realized something was wrong and then accepted that something was wrong and then given him a divorce. And of course, life just doesn't really work like that. Things are seldom that streamlined and easy. But of course, there is a confrontation of sorts. Watts has to face his children on camera, and sure enough, it doesn't go well. So, according to the Discovery Documents, page 681, when Chris Watts caught up to her, Bella was screaming at the top of her lungs. And in a sense, this is also quite an authentic response from the children. If the account we get in the Discovery Documents is accurate, then the reunion had to be filmed twice. Now, why would Bella be terrified of her father or be acting in such a strange way towards him? Well, one possibility is that the little girl may have overheard her mother talking with her father on the phone and possibly crying or appearing distressed afterwards. Another possibility is that Shan'ann may have implied to Bella that Watts's mother had tried to kill her sister or almost killed her. Either way, having spent 5 weeks at this point only in the care of her mother, well, it's possible that emotional bond with her father had been refashioned, and so she'd almost like forgotten about her father in a way. Later in the week, Watts would actually complain to his wife about this fact that his daughter seemed to have forgotten about her and didn't even seem to notice that he wasn't there anymore. So this was also a factor in this whole pulling away from one another, the glue that was holding them together coming unstuck. And so maybe it's just not a very good idea for couples to spend 5 weeks apart in this manner. So it's possible this emotional bond with her father had been refashioned now, well, at the start anyway, into a kind of terror. Ironically, this intuition, if you want to call it that, was correct at the end of the day. But it may also be that if Watts felt his girls had turned against him in some significant way, well, he may have seen their lives as taken by Shan'ann and lost to him. In any event, this was another dynamic that wasn't so great, when he goes to North Carolina. In any event, it's probably a mistake to ask whether Watts' behavior caused his children to feel alienated or the other way around. It was likely a bit of both. Now, if the video clip you've just watched is the second take of the reunion at the airport, we notice a few things weird about it. Number one, neither of the children seem to have any kind of obvious limp or injury to their ankles or feet. Remember, just the previous day, this had been a big issue, and Watts was under the impression that she'd actually dislocated her feet, but now there doesn't seem to be any of this. We do hear Shan'ann saying, "Don't run," over the sound of an airport alarm. Watts appears awkward, and despite his boos and love yous over text, makes little effort to even greet or acknowledge Shan'ann on camera. On the other hand, if he does make an effort and Shan'ann posts it, and Kissinger sees it, he's now going to have to answer to her as well. Sure enough, Shan'ann posts the kind of fake reunion online, which is how and why we're able to see it today. Number 4, Shan'ann recording the reunion and sharing it online was her way, arguably, of caging her husband, of controlling him, by continually portraying him against his will in the role of a loving father and husband. But really, one's got to wonder, whether it's deliberate or not, wasn't it a kind of coercion, coercing him into staying in the marriage? And so all of these videos it's something that he doesn't really want to participate in, but he's kind of forced to. She knew as well as he did that things weren't going well in their marriage and with their family in general, yet he's got to perform in these videos regardless. And then 5, finally, Watts hugs and kisses Shan'ann off camera, but the way he does this sets off the alarm bells for Shan'ann. A few days later, she's still commenting on how she practically had to ask him for a kiss at the airport. Bear in mind, Watts' official version, and apparently the accepted version, is that on the morning of the murders, he had sex with Shan'ann, and then they had a conversation where they discussed getting rid of the house. Even then, even in this fictional spiel, Watts didn't see himself admitting to the affair. He couldn't. It's important to emphasize Watts' use of terms of endearments to soothe his wife, while his feelings for her and how he acts towards her aren't actually affectionate either. It's that thing, actions speak louder than words. It's also worth noting that Shan'ann is also guilty of the same sort of double-sided approach. In a way, she's scornful in her messages and instructions, certainly at times, but then the perfect all-is-well mother on social media in these videos. On July 31st, he got into a shitload of trouble over a parking disagreement. Imagine what would have happened if he asked his pregnant wife for a divorce while he's having an affair. The same thing with regard to wanting to terminate the pregnancy. If he gets into a shitload of trouble over a parking disagreement, can you imagine what hell is in store for him if he's saying, well, I've changed my mind about the baby? If you doubt that, bear in mind Shan'ann is still in a kind of nuclear meltdown with Chris Watts' parents over nuts in ice cream. This dilemma would be on his mind for the next week. How do I deal with this issue? I've got a real issue, and I'm not going to just go back to this marriage. How can I get out of this? And I do think if his time there in North Carolina had been really good, really happy, perhaps he would have had second thoughts about Kissinger. In any event, while his wife and children mulled around him, and while his mistress sent him regular images of herself in various states of undress, this dilemma would preoccupy him. And so what do you think? Do you think on day 1 it was at a certain place and then got less? Or do you think it progressed and got progressively worse and escalated day after day? And why do you think that was the case? Well, I'm not going to take it further than that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.